Arno Hach was a German writer publishing under the name Arno Hach. He was born in 1877 in Chemnitz, studying the history of art at the Technische Hochschule Dresden. He worked as an editor, wrote poems and drama, and was sent to the front during the First World War as an officer. In the 1930s, he devoted himself to the history and culture of Berlin. He disappeared in 1945 and was never heard from again. In 1920, he published his most famous work, The Maori's Head, Tales Between Dream and Illusion. This strange mask concerns a Russian agent who is attending a masked ball, and remembers his involvement with a female Russian anarchist who was also a vampire of some sort, and who, despite having been shot, attends the ball and murders him, his friend trying to catch her ending up lost at a graveyard. Justice as a man murdered his cheating wife, and then pinned the murder on her lover, and after his execution writing a note to the attorney in charge of the case, going on about how what he did was absolutely necessary for the sake of justice. In The Helper's Helper, a Russian aristocrat bribes a barber to cut off the nose of his Greek rival in love, but when he refuses to pay, the barber cuts off his nose too and spends the rest of his life in an asylum. The Wonder has candidate of theology Gotthilf fürchte Gott Heilmeier on a train, where he shares a compartment with a man with a skull for a face, who tells him the train is going to fall into the abyss when the bridge gives out. He manages to pull the brake, despite the other man's effort, but he gets fined for pulling the brake anyway, even when the bridge really does collapse. In Before Death Came, a balloon crashes into a parish church, and in the balloon one finds one man hanged, and another with a bullet in his brain, and a manuscript detailing how one man ran over the other man's child, then had an affair with his wife, who killed herself while trying to go through with an abortion, and how the husband tricked the balloon flyer and got him stuck without food or water in a balloon which he could never get back down, with the only company being the husband's corpse, which he could not even dare throw overboard for fear of falling over himself. In Engineer Vermaelen's Wife, a man keeps his wife between life and death via hypnotic suggestion and a ton of ice, until she is autopsied by a pathologist and dies. And so Vermaelen uses his power to make a man stab the pathologist to death, while he himself is safely over the border. The Indian dancer has a count invite an Indian dancer and her husband to his castle, and ends up sleeping with her. So the husband has both of his snakes stalk and bite them while he's away. The castle by the country road concerns a man who bets he can make his way across the country for 7 days on alms, but his hunger makes him witness a vision of past events in an old castle, of how the owner was murdered by his servant because the count was sleeping with his wife. And then the man awakes in a hospital, and discovers the mummified body of the woman in a secret chamber, and his doctor, a descendant of her husband, goes mad and nearly strangles him. Human skin has a tanner during the French Revolution make his business by making leather from the bodies of the guillotined. He hates working on female corpses, but is visited by a marquis who wants to have pants made from the skin of a murderess. The pants seem to exert a weird influence on his personality, so he burns them, but is still found the next morning with a slit throat like all her other victims. The head of the Maori concerns the disappearance of Saunders, whose grandfather was in the shrunken head trade, and killed Ngahue, a Maori warrior, for an English buyer for the sake of his tattooed head. And then one day Saunders is killed by Ngahue's son, who shrinks the white man's head and puts it in a museum box instead of his father's.